Hi.
Hi.
First off, I would like to thank you for braving the cold today to be here. Secondly, I want to welcome you to the Michigan School for the Blind's Administration Building. Have you ever been here before?
No, I have not. I've been by, I've drove by it, but I've never been like in it or this close.
Have you ever heard of the school before?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've, heard people say, the School of the Blind, but no, I don't, I'm not familiar with it at all.
All right, well, hopefully I can give you a little bit more information about the history of the building as well as what plans are for the future of it. So just so you know, the tour is going to take about 10 minutes. It's going to be entirely outside. It's currently unsafe to enter the building. We probably won't leave this little area right here in the front. But if you do need to use the restroom or have a drink of water, there is the Neighborhood Empowerment Center right over there, and we can head over there to use those facilities.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Also, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask me at any time. Also, if you want to just wait till the end, we can do that too, and we can have a more in-depth discussion, maybe somewhere where it's a little bit more warm. All right, so this site is actually originally home to the Michigan School for the Blind. So the Michigan School for the Blind was originally started by Abigail Rogers. Now, Abigail Rogers spent her whole life fighting for women to be admitted into Michigan colleges on an equal basis as men. Unfortunately, when she started the school, she didn't have a sustainable plan on what would happen to the school after women were admitted. So she died in 1869, and the school closed that same year. And so this was about 14 years after the school opened. And in 1870 is when Michigan Agricultural College began admitting women. And then University of Michigan followed the year after that. So when the school closed, it was actually purchased by the Independent Order of the Oddfellows, which is a fraternal organization dedicated to serving the disabled, elderly, and the infirm. When they purchased the building, they invested $30,000 into renovating the exterior of the building. Unfortunately, the order's mission was never really fulfilled, and they ended up closing 2 years later. So imagine investing $30,000 in 1870, which is over $500,000 today, and having all of your plans fall through. Not the best history for that part. So the building actually laid empty for several years, and it was during this time that Flint's Michigan Asylum was growing exponentially. So the Flint Michigan Asylum was dedicated to educating the blind, the deaf, and people with other disabilities. But it was also at that time that the state decided they needed a separate facility dedicated just for educating the blind. So in 1879, they purchased the old Michigan Female College, and in 1880, the Michigan School for the Blind opened as Michigan's first public school dedicated to solely educating the blind. When the school first opened, they used lecture and demonstration as their teaching tools. But about 5 years after that, so in 1885, they began introducing Braille reading and writing. Are you familiar with Braille at all?
Well, I know that's what blind people use to read, right? The little bumpy stuff, and then
So the little bumpy stuff, while we use our eyes to read, people who are visually impaired use their sense of touch to read. And what's also really interesting too is this building is on the Michigan Register of Historic Sites, and the plaque that describes the history of the building is actually the only other plaque that's written in Braille also.
Where's the plaque at?
The plaque's right over there at the central sidewalk entrance. Yeah. So in addition to reading and writing in Braille, students were also exposed to other extracurricular activities such as music, drama, dance, and other sports such as track and wrestling.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, so they were really dedicated to offering the same sort of experience that any normal child would have at another public school. So after some time, around 1910, the school would have been 55 years at that point. They had already built several other structures around the campus, and they kind of started to notice the downfalls of their old administration building. So they decided that they needed to build a new administration building to better fit the needs of their students. So they hired a man by the name of Edwin Bode. Edwin Bode had already designed a couple of the other buildings on the campus. He designed the old high school over here, and then also the superintendent's house right over there. So in addition to those buildings, he had also designed the old Carnegie Public Library, which is downtown, and he also designed several of the buildings over on Michigan State University's campus. And just prior to being hired to to design this administration building, he had designed a building for for Flint School for the Deaf. So he was already really familiar with designing these sort of educational style buildings, but having just finished the project at Flint School for the Deaf, he was becoming more aware of designing a building that would fit the needs of particular students. So in this case, he designed what they ended up naming the Abigail, after Abigail Rogers, in a way that would fit the needs of blind students. So he made sure that the hallways were extra wide and there was handrails everywhere. There's also a few other features outside of the building that he was not necessarily responsible for, but are pretty interesting for, a campus of this size. So every sidewalk on this campus, which you can't see because there's snow, but over here you can see there's ripples right here along every side of the sidewalk. So this was so that students could tell when they were reaching the edge of the sidewalk and they could better navigate their spaces. So this may seem a little bit far-fetched, and it may not have been Bode's intention because he was already pretty familiar and pretty known for designing this sort of style of structure. But when you look at this building, it's really interesting because you see these massive columns that are supported by a roof. Now this is called a portico, and this is really interesting because it gives this massive building a real vantage point for students. So especially as someone who's visually impaired, now if you close your eyes and you try to describe something to someone, it's not that easy or that interesting to describe a massive square box. But adding this portico to it really gives students a sense of where they are and where the entrance is to such an iconic part of their campus. So the entire project was actually completed in 3 phases. So the central part of the building, including this entrance here, was completed first. And it was completed in 1916. Now there is some indication that the original female college outer shell is within this central portion. We do know that each of the wings were completely demolished and rebuilt. The north wing was completed in 1918, and then the south wing was completed in 1921. So overall, the project took about 7 years to complete. But during that time, they were still adding additional buildings and different activities to the campus. And by 1963, they had attracted and admitted their most famous student to date. So little Stevie Wonder had already been signed to Motown Records.
Really?
And he had already released his first album.
I didn't know Stevie Wonder went here.
Began at Michigan School for the Blind. He was about 13 years old. He was trained in classical piano in these very halls, and he celebrated his high school graduation on these very snow-covered steps. So now we really have to think about, this building has meant so much to so many people, especially in terms of Michigan's dedication to educating underserved populations. What are we supposed to do with this old building now? I mean, if you look at it, the bricks are crumbling, the windows are broken, there's graffiti everywhere. But there still really does remain a chance to pay respect to the building's past purpose by dedicating the building to serve other underprivileged populations. So there's currently plans to rehabilitate the building into low-income housing for seniors and people with disabilities. And what's really great too is that the firm who's in charge of the project has vowed to preserve the front of this building while making the main resident entrance in the back of the building, which would be especially nice for adding in the necessary accessibility standards and codes and requirements that they need. So really, there is hope for this building in the future. It may be hard to see now, but eventually there is hope for this building in the future. So if there's more information on this, this is just a short tour. But if you go to the Michigan History Center, there's an exhibit that's been put on by the Low Incident Outreach Project. They have an exhibit there with some of the artifacts that they found in the building. And then also the Michigan Archives has over 20 feet of archival material about the building. So I really, really hope that you enjoyed the tour, and I hope that while there may be plans in the future to rehab this building for a new purpose, really the best way to honor this building's past is through education. And for you especially, braving the cold to be here to learn more about the building. So I really, really appreciate you being here. If you have any further questions, please let me know. We can visit any of the other structures that you see on the campus. There are over 20 of them.
Wow.
Also, if you want to go somewhere more warm to discuss this building in particular, we can always go over to the Neighborhood Empowerment Center to discuss things more if you'd like.
I'd like.
So thank you for coming, and I hope you have a great day.
Oh, thank you. This was very informative. I didn't know this about. That's good. Thank you.